we take our time, but we can start soon, but you can join anyway. There's a lot of media in the mix, so they are coming their way, but we're going to start anyway. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this post-Congress press conference with FIFA President Gianni Infantino. I see that you have your headsets with you, and in case that you don't know, we have the following languages available: channel 1 for English, channel 2 for French, channel 3 for Spanish, 4 for German, 5 for Russian, 6 for Portuguese, and 7 for Arabic. I will just ask you to show your interest in doing a question by raising your hand, so that I can ask my colleagues to give you a microphone. And before doing that question, I would appreciate that you say your name and the organization you work for before doing the questions. So the floor is now yours to request questions. Please, in the front.
Thank you. Kira Radnich, World Soccer. Onofre, congratulations on your new position, incidentally. Mr. President, congratulations on your re-election. 3 years ago, when you were elected for the first time, where did you realistically expect to be with FIFA today?
Thanks, Kira, for the question. Obviously, also congratulations to Onofre.
Thank you very much.
For his brilliant, he was elected unanimously, I understand as well. Better than
you answer the question.
Honestly, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I did not, 3 years ago and 4 months, necessarily expect to win. Of course, I went into the race to win. But really, I didn't know whether I was going to win, so I did not really. I prepared a program, which was my campaign program. I knew, of course, FIFA from the outside. I didn't know what I could expect coming in, how fast I could move certain things, how fast we could change certain processes. And I just went into it from day one, put up my sleeves and started to work. And honestly as well, in the last few years, I didn't really have much time as well to look at what we had achieved. And then when you come closer to this Congress, for example, you draw a line and you have to look back and see, well, what have we actually put in place? And it's, I think, quite a few things, especially looking also at the situation we were, or FIFA was, a few things on which I'm proud and happy for. But during these 3 years, I never really had the feeling that we were doing so many things. I always wanted to do more. I always put the threshold high and try to achieve many things. Well, unfortunately, we didn't achieve them. Others we did, but I think bottom line, it's quite okay, especially if we compare where we were from where we are. And I just started, worked, and today I'm happy. Thanks.
There was a request here in the front. It's Portuguese.
Infantino, hi, Jamil Shade from Brazil. My question is first about the disparity in football today. In the world, you say it's unified, but today we have never seen such a concentration of wealth and talent in only one continent. What do you think is the future of South American football? Not only exporting players, but how to deal with this disparity? And secondly, one of the issues during your 3 years was the fact that you proposed to fund basically the entry of a financial fund into football, at least in some of the competitions. Will this project come back after this election? Thank you.
Well, I think that, thank you for the questions, obrigado. I think that there is not a concentration of wealth in one continent. There is actually a concentration of wealth in a few clubs, very few clubs, probably less than 10 clubs, in less than 4 or 5 countries in one continent, right? At the end of the day. This is where the concentration is. And generally, of course, Europe is far above all other continents, which has to do with the history of Europe, with the football culture of Europe, with the work. I was working myself 16 years in UEFA, where we introduced many, many things during these years. UEFA was working and others much less. And so European football, of course, grew much more compared to others. Recently only I realized, for example, since you're from Brazil, that actually the revenues of the Brazilian top division are not far away from the top European leagues. I still wonder why the best players then leave Brazil, and also the second and third and fourth best, to go to play maybe to second, third or fourth level, so to say, places rather than staying in Brazil. And I think these are questions that we need to ask ourselves, because if we look at European football as well, we see that it is largely co-financed by outside of Europe as well, Asia, US. And we need to think about these things. Because when we say football is global, we shouldn't just say global means, well, everyone pays, but all the money goes in one place, right? Football is global means that we should develop football all over the world, including top leagues. When I go to the US, for example, and I speak to friends there from the business world or the political world, doesn't matter, and they all tell me, you see, US soccer is progressing. Yes, it is progressing. But you are America, you cannot be happy with progressing. You need to be aiming at being the best. Same goes for China, for example, who is coming, but we need to foster this and we need to take measures for football to be played really worldwide at top level. My vision in this respect is the following. Today we have maybe 10 clubs, and they are all in a few countries in Europe, who can become world champion, who are the best in the world. And we have maybe also at national team level, maybe 10 national teams who can become world champion. They are all Europeans with maybe 1 or 2 or 3, so that's maybe 1 or 2 South Americans. Maybe, right? My vision is that we should have 50 clubs from all over the world who could become world champion. Out of these 50, of course, 20 or 25 will be Europeans, but also if you have 20 Europeans, it would already be the double than what you have today. And 50 national teams who can also become world champion. We have it in women's football. Not 50, less, but from all over the world. So why can we not have it as well in men's football? Well, we just need to develop this, and that's why we are looking, for example, at Club World Cup. We will analyze, we will think about other possibilities, and then we see. As to the second question, well, we have now decided to have a Club World Cup in 2021. We will commercialize it. We will see what comes in. There was never a question of a financial investor taking over a competition. Never. Never. The rights always remained with FIFA. I've been working in this area in UEFA for 16 years, commercializing rights, generating 4 times more than FIFA is generating with rights. I know a little bit of that business. I would certainly never, ever in my life think or propose that any part of a competition or a competition is owned by somebody else. It was a possibility of an innovative way, which is actually even not so innovative, it's just that the figures are much lower, because we have it already now. Agencies proposing minimum guarantees for the sale of rights. This is happening. It's happening in UEFA, it's happening in FIFA, just the amounts are much, much lower. And the rights scope is lower as well. But the model exists already, but the rights remain the ownership of the organization. I'm the FIFA president, of course I'm protecting FIFA. Unfortunately, a lot of misinformation is coming out, and we are responsible, certainly, for not correcting it and not putting it right. But now, we have decided to create the Club World Cup. We will commercialize it, and I'm sure we'll have a very successful commercialization of this competition.
Right there on the left.
Thank you. You don't think? Yeah.
Izquierda, Tariq, left-hand side.
Gianni, Tariq Panj from the New York Times. Two questions. One about women, and there's been a lot of sexual harassment allegations and sexual assault allegations across the world, really. I think 5 different countries in the past 5 months. How serious do you think this issue is? And what mechanisms are kind of in place? I've spoken to some women myself who have said they have been harassed and they didn't want to come forward because they didn't think they'd be heard. And it's not just a FIFA thing. Are there mechanisms in football at confederation level as well for women who are in work or football players as well to be able to kind of report what is a horrific allegation without fearing that they are either in danger or their careers are ruined? That's the first question. And you talked about FIFA being on a sort of even keel or away from this crisis, and I would agree with you, it is. But again, at confederation levels, and this is where some of the problems in the past have come from, we have we had the AFC election recently where Sheikh Ahmed from Kuwait, who had he not quit football, might have been banned from football, appeared to be a kingmaker at another election in a sport that he shouldn't have any part in. And then we have in CAF, I think this press conference is not long enough to describe the list of allegations against senior officials there and what the hell's going on. So what is the state of football, and what do you think about these confederations and what they're doing, given what happened in 2015? Thanks.
Thanks, Tariq. Well, on the first question, sexual harassment, it's something terrible. I have 4 daughters myself, and they do sport. And to be honest, I shouldn't say that, but I don't know what I would do if something would happen. So obviously, where there are human beings, unfortunately and sadly, where human beings are, in particular men, are in contact with children, boys or girls, in dressing rooms, be it in football, be it in any other sport or in any other life situation, these things sadly happen, and we had situations as well in football. And we have to take them very seriously, and we are looking at that. We have elaborated there as well some guidelines that we send to the associations, to send to their clubs with hotlines, with possibilities to report. But it's not so easy in certain, let's say, Western European countries, or the US probably as well. You have this anyway possibility to go to speak to somebody and you have nothing to fear and whatever. In other countries of the world, this is much more difficult, and there we are working, and thanks God we have Fatma as well, who has kept great contacts with the UN, working with the UN, because sometimes, yes, we need even to give these girls or women protection, because you don't know what can happen. This goes beyond football. This that these people have nothing to do in football, that kind of goes without saying. I mean, they should just be out and that's it. And we have to reinforce and to look at this very seriously, because it is an issue. And we cannot say it's not a big issue because there are not many cases. Even one case is one case too much, and we need to look into it. And we are making guidance, and we are thinking, how can we help more and better? There are some associations, England or others in the region, who have put in place systems that can help other associations as well, and we are putting them in contact, because it is a delicate matter, and obviously out of football, but that's certainly not enough for people who would commit anything like that. Certainly not. The harsher, the better. The second question was? I don't remember.
The confederation level.
Yes. Well, we need to start somewhere, right? So we started at FIFA, and I think by now everyone has realized where we are. Of course, where there are human beings, there are all the good and bad sides of the human being. And it's not unlikely that maybe some people from the past are trying to resurface because they had benefited a lot and try to still steer and guide certain things. Well, I'm committed 200%, 1,000,000% to eradicate it, whatever it takes. But FIFA has suspended the President and General Secretary of a confederation, Oceania, recently, which, because of wrongdoings, which happened before 2016, but which we found out only later when we started to introduce the audits. I'm not sure this would have happened before. Maybe not, doesn't matter. Certainly was not checked, because if somebody would have checked it, they would have found out. But this was a confederation, and is a confederation, which was supporting me. So I would have had a political will to protect them, right? But how can I protect somebody that commits an illicit or illegal act, that determines the money that is for football? And even if I would like, I cannot, because we have our bodies who are in charge of these things, and they are acting very, very seriously. So wherever there is something to look into, they will look into, and they will take the measure it takes. And if somebody has done something wrong, then I'm sorry, there's no place. Sorry.
Arno Richter, Deutsche Presseagentur. Sie haben in Ihrer Rede darüber gesprochen und eben auch ein sehr ehrgeiziges Ziel genannt.
About a very ambitious goal, both for the Club Cup and the rest. How do you feel about the reconstruction or the of the Champions League? Thank you. I am not aware of the UEFA's proposal yet. I do read some articles, and I can see what's written in those articles, of course. I used to work for UEFA. I don't work there anymore. It is not the role of the FIFA president to decide what is good or bad for UEFA. FIFA's responsibility is to ensure that football is in good health across the globe. And sometimes we do have to intervene. When I was at UEFA, if ever we wanted to introduce something new, the large leagues were usually against our objectives because the situation was going to change. I want to globalize football. And our strategy is not to create an elite. What we want to do is open the world of football up, which is exactly the opposite of the intentions you expressed. We don't want 10 or 20 teams to be able to win. We want 50 to be able to participate in this economic potential and so on. For example, in the US, in Japan, in China, in India, Mexico, Brazil, nobody can tell me that there are teams, even just a couple of teams, that can actually financially compete with European teams. And I think that we need to change this. We need to work towards this. We'll see whether this works, but what we want to do is open up the world of football to the world. Thank you.
Dominique Courdier,
News Time Football Agency. You met Emmanuel Macron yesterday, and he stated that he would defend what he calls the French model with you. So the modifications to the Champions League, and you mentioned something that leads us to believe that you already have a good idea of what is going to happen in terms of format and so on. No, I won't go into this anymore. I need to elaborate this a little bit in more detail. I will be speaking to the Vice President and so on. But we will be discussing this, and we decided to create the Forum for Women's Football because we want to push and drive women's football forward. I had the idea that, we talk about football all the time. It's not just Europe or South Africa. No, across the globe people talk about football. It is very important, for example, to organize a form of forum to discuss these things. For example, the idea of the executive summits is a good example. If the German president and the Mozambican president meet and they can discuss issues together, I think that we will be able to move forward. I think that that will be possible. Thank you.
Hi, congratulations on your re-election.
Thanks.
Had things worked out differently, it might be Michel Platini sitting there today.
Yeah.
Given he is now sort of thrown quite a bit of mud at you, and his ban from football is preparing to end, and he doesn't seem to admit any of his wrongdoing for all the financial payment issues. Do you think he can be trusted if he does return to football, given some of his conduct while serving his ban? And do you really want to see him back playing a role in football, given how he's acted? And then I've got a question on women's football.
We live in a country, France or Switzerland, doesn't matter really, which has the freedom of expression, which means everyone can say whatever he wants, and and that's fine. What can I say? We were together 9 years. This is what I remember. We did quite a lot in 9 years in UEFA. FIFA bodies, CAS bodies have. Yeah, you can ask the second question. It's okay.
Yeah, should have done both, but anyway, it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. Swiss Supreme Court, and they all took decisions. What can I say? I'm the FIFA president. I cannot interfere in these matters. Everyone is free to do whatever he wants, as long as it's within the limits of the laws and the regulations. Regulations. If you want to be part of a movement like the football movement, you have to respect some rules, and then everyone can, I think, make up his own or her own judgment.
Just a question on the actual Women's World Cup. When you go around Paris, the Champs-Élysées, various other places, you see very little mention of the Women's World Cup. There's no banners, no posters. Obviously, this is a key moment for players to get exposure. They want their voices to be heard. They want to use the tournament to become better known, to grow the women's game. How can that be achieved when there's little awareness? And also the fact that FIFA does impose restrictions that prevent the players being heard and seen, say, post-match and filmed by media, unless they're paying for the right to actually show the matches. So for non-rights holders, so the players are denied the maximum exposure possible.
Is that true? Yeah. Somebody will hear me after that. I was not aware. I agree. I mean, there should be maximum exposure. Of course, we have to protect the rights holders. That's right. But then we must also make sure that there is maximum possible exposure. I think this country will enter into the real World Cup fever in 2 days when it starts, when it kicks off. But it has already started. I mean, we are sold out in, I think, 20 matches or so. Sales. And sales are mainly local, right, for a Women's World Cup. Not so many like for the Men's World Cup, not millions of fans traveling. We will soon reach the 1 million tickets sold, which shows that in different host cities, which are maybe a bit smaller cities than Paris, there, I think the fever of the Women's World Cup is coming over. But we will certainly, as of today as well, and the next couple of days, boost the communication around the Women's World Cup to give it maximum possible exposure. And I'm sure that France will be a great host. I mean, summer in France is nice weather, good food, good wine, whatever you want, you have it. So please come to France and watch some football.
On the third row here on the right, yes, please, almost in front of me.
Yes, congratulations again, Mr. President. Martin Lipson from The Sun in England.
Thank you.
There seems to be a little bit of confusion with regards to the whole mechanism for the 2030 host process. Can you, at this stage, say when the decision will be made, how it will be made? It will be a Congress, when that might be, and also rotation and what it means. I think everyone took rotation to mean that if a tournament is in Asia, Asia cannot host either of the next two, but the statutes are less than clear.
Yeah.
So, in simple terms, can China bid for 2030?
You turned around quite a bit before going to the answer is, I don't know. Because you're right, the statutes, they say one. The decisions that were taken always in the past, including for the last one by the Council, say two, because then the Council introduces the regulations for the bidding process. We will discuss it in the coming months, including already as of the next FIFA Council, which is in China, by the way, in October in Shanghai. And there we will put already some marks down in terms of the timing and so on. We didn't do that yet because we just had a bidding process. And I said it as well, I think, in my speech. Probably the first bidding process in the history of FIFA without scandal. It was not easy. Of course, at the end it's simple when things work out, but it was not easy. People tried to change the regulations even during the course of the bidding process, including people who were not necessarily interested in it. But we stood. We stand, we had the regulations, we implemented them, we brought them through, we made it public, and the next bidding process will be exactly the same, including some of the learnings, of course, that we made in this bidding process. When will the decision be taken? Well, the next presidential election is in 23, so I guess it will be either in 22 or in 24. And if China can bid, we will see. For me, as FIFA president, the more, the merrier. So the more bidders we have, the happier I am. Like for the Women's World Cup in 23.
An offer, and of course to Gianni. Andrew Warshaw from Inside World Football. Gianni, you've already answered one of my two questions that Rob asked you about Michel Platini's somewhat disparaging and disrespectful remarks, so I'll move on to the other one. Vis-à-vis the Club World Cup, you mentioned earlier about, you were very insistent about the funding for that earlier in the press conference. Can you just explain funding? And also, the same tournament, Gianni...
Europeans will take part. Of course, the Europeans will take part. We are discussing with UEFA, with the ECA, about some of the details. In terms of the commercialization, I hope to make 50 billion, not only 25. I'm not sure we'll get there, but I hope so. But I just would like once again to underline about this story that, you know, nothing was proposed for decision ever to the Council. Something was proposed for discussion to the Council. And what was proposed is, I repeat, the same exact model that exists today in confederations. The model I operated when I was in UEFA, that I think UEFA is still operating with some of the agencies that they have, was to create an agency, to have somebody creating this agency together, and having somebody who puts a financial guarantee. I think that, you know, in any normal business in the world, if the CEO or the president or the chairman comes and brings to its shareholders a proposal for a deal that brings 25 billion for something new, well, I'm not saying he would get a standing ovation, but maybe people will say, well, at least let's look into that, right? And if there is something dodgy, we will not do it, but maybe there is not something dodgy, and we can do it. Well, I think if I would be making dodgy deals, this would be known. I've been signing in the last 20 years contracts for I don't know how many billions, and negotiating them as well. So, of course, what I propose is always at the highest standards. But then we discuss. We see that we need first to decide on the sporting side, which we did, 24 teams, 2021. And now we will commercialize, we will go to the market, free market, open market. Let's see what comes back. I hope a lot, because I want to remind everyone, I was saying this at the summit meetings to the member associations, of one thing. Everyone who's organizing competitions in the world, be it a league, an association, or a confederation, they commercialize their competition all over the world. You can watch the Premier League, the Bundesliga, the Champions League, Serie A, all over the world. You can go to Mongolia, you will see it. You can go to Bhutan, you will see it. You can go to South Sudan, you will see it. Everyone is commercializing it everywhere. Where do these revenues go? To the organizer of the competition. Who does what with them? He distributes these revenues to his own members or participants. So the English to the English, the French to the French, the Germans to the Germans, the Europeans to the Europeans. And there is only one body in the world, and this body is called FIFA, who whatever is generated is distributed to the entire world. That's why when we speak about the Club World Cup, of course a majority of teams will be Europeans and then South Americans because they have the biggest history and so on and so forth. But the revenues generated, there will be a significant part which will go for solidarity. And the only body who is doing solidarity all over the world is FIFA. Nobody else. Only FIFA. Nobody else. And this is something we need to foster, and something I will continue to push as hard as I can. Thank you.
On the left-hand side here in the front, second row.
Why you look so serious?
It's a serious matter.
Richard Naha du site africafoot.fr.
Africanfoot.fr.
Félicitations déjà
First
pour
of all,
votre élection.
congratulations for your
On connaît
election.
votre attachement pour l'Afrique.
We know
Surtout,
your commitment to Africa and how
je me souviens lors du
much
sommet de
you
la
support Africa. And I
FIFA
remember
en
in the
Mauritanie,
FIFA summit
vous
in
aviez sorti une
Mauritania
phrase forte
that you
qui
said
était
something I remember
ceux
very
qui sont
well.
venus dans le foot pour s'enrichir,
Those
la
who are in
FIFA va
football
les suivre.
to
Et
become
justement
rich will
avec
be
votre
sued by
projet
FIFA.
FIFA Forward
And
2.0,
with Forward
on a vu un peu ce que ça
2.0,
donne en Mauritanie.
we've
Mais
seen what Mauritania
on
will
s'attend
receive.
depuis un moment, il n'y a que la Mauritanie,
But
mais on ne voit pas d'autres
we've seen
pays émerger.
what's happened in
avec
Mauritania, but we haven't
avec ces
seen
fonds
others
de FIFA
countries
Forward.
emerge in the same
Qu'est-ce que
way
la
through
FIFA-
forward funding.
Comment la FIFA évalue les pays
So how does
par rapport à
FIFA
ce projet?
assess
Et
countries
ça, c'est la première
with
question.
regard
Et
to
la
these
deuxième
projects?
question,
That's the first
dernièrement,
question.
la semaine dernière, on a eu un
Secondly,
problème avec la
last week
VAR
we had a problem with
pendant la
VAR
finale de la Ligue
in
des
the
Champions.
final of the African Champions
Est-ce
League.
que la FIFA a un droit de regard sur cette finale? Parce qu'on sait que c'est l'IFA
What
qui
are
donne
FIFA's views
l'autorisation
on this final?
pour
Because we
utiliser
know
la VAR.
that FIFA gives
Et
authorization for VAR
est-ce que
to
la
be
FIFA ne peut pas accompagner
used.
la CAF
But could
dans
the
cette
FIFA
nouvelle
not
technologie? Parce que,
support
pour le dire
CAF
vrai,
with this new
c'est pas encore
technology?
maîtrisé par les Africains.
Because it seems
Merci.
that it's not quite yet being managed appropriately by
pour ces
African football.
questions.
Thank you very much for the
Oui, je
questions.
tiens à l'Afrique, je
Yes, I
crois
really believe
en l'Afrique.
in Africa.
Je pense qu'il y a des exemples, il y a des bons exemples, c'est pas vrai
And
que
I
c'est que
think
la
there are
Mauritanie.
plenty of examples. I don't think it's just Mauritania.
Le président Ahmed Yahya a fait un travail exceptionnel.
It's true that the president
D'ailleurs,
there
ils
has
sont qualifiés pour la
done
première fois
exceptional work and they managed to qualify for the first
pour
time
une Coupe d'Afrique des Nations.
for an African Cup of Nations.
Un travail exceptionnel, ils ont construit un
Exceptional,
stade
absolutely. They
de
built a
9000 places qui a
stadium
coûté
with 9,000
$1,400,000.
seats, which
J'étais,
cost $1.4 million.
Franchement,
I've been there.
beau, c'est pas
And it's
Wembley,
beautiful. It's great. It's not Wembley, of course,
bien sûr, à Nouakchott,
obviously,
mais c'est beau.
but it's still
Mais il y a
a
du
great
travail qui est
stadium.
fait aussi ailleurs avec des
But
centres
there's work
d'entraînement.
being done
J'étais au
elsewhere.
Niger,
Also in Niger, for example, I was there. I saw the work being done
Bénin,
there. I was
j'étais
in
en
Benin,
Gambie,
I was
j'en ai
in
visité
Gambia. I've visited quite a number
des centres.
of places,
Et on est en train de commencer à
centres,
investir.
technical centres
Bien
there.
sûr, nous, on doit
And it's true that investment is
accompagner
only just beginning to an extent, and it's
beaucoup
absolutely
plus
true that we should provide
ce qui se
greater
fait,
support
notamment,
to the work that's being
notamment en
done,
Afrique, parce que ce qui manque
especially
souvent,
in
c'est
Africa.
effectivement même
Because
les
what's
compétences,
missing sometimes are perhaps
je dirais, basiques
skills,
parfois, de
quite
comment
basic
entamer un
capacities
projet.
around project
On a
management.
fait un terrain en terre battue à Kinshasa,
In
c'est
Kinshasa,
rien, mais c'est
we're able
magnifique.
to install a grass pitch. It's
On
not
essaye
much,
de faire,
but it was
on a fait
magnificent.
un projet pilote avec une
We tried
illumination
to
pour qu'on puisse jouer le soir.
have
parce
a
que
number of
on a fait
pilot
dans le passé tous
projects
ces terrains
elsewhere so
artificiels
that games could be played in the evening.
en gazon
Because we
artificiel, et puis
have
on s'est rendu
this
compte
artificial
qu'avec
turf
le
with
soleil,
these artificial
il y
pitches,
a
and then we
70 degrés sur le terrain,
realised
la
that
journée.
actually the temperature on the pitch during the day is
Quand je suis allé,
ridiculous.
moi, visiter ces endroits, je disais aux
And
gens,
so
mais
I visited
il
these
fait trop chaud la
places, and I
journée,
said, but
regarde
yeah,
le
it's too
terrain,
hot to play during the
les
day.
chaussures fondent.
Actually, the shoes were practically melting. The football boots were practically
Et
melting.
alors je leur disais, mais jouez le
And so
soir.
I said,
Ah
well,
oui, mais
why
le
don't you
soir,
play
on
in
n'a
the
pas de
evening?
lumière.
And they said, yeah, but we've got no
Comment on
light.
fait?
There are no
Alors, on a
floodlights.
financé un
So
pilote,
what do
un
we do
projet
about that?
pilote,
So we financed a pilot project
Burkina,
in Burkina
pour
Faso.
une illumination avec l'énergie solaire.
So this was
Ça
floodlights
donnait des bons résultats, et maintenant,
using
on va le mettre en
solar
place dans
energy,
beaucoup
and the
de-
results have been excellent. And so we're going to
de
try
pays aussi.
and replicate
Donc
that
ça
in
bouge.
a number of other
Ça
countries. So
avance.
things are moving.
Il faut être là, il faut y
Progress
croire.
is being
Il y a
made. You need to be
beaucoup
there.
de-
You need to
de
believe.
légendes du football africain,
And there are
Didier
plenty
Drogba,
of
Samuel
African
Eto'o.
football legends, Samuel
On
Eto'o,
mentionne que
Didier
deux
Drogba,
qui
just to
nous
mention
aident,
two, who are really
qui
helping
veulent
us
voir des
on this
résultats aussi,
front and
parce
who
que
want to see
il y a un
results
talent incroyable
also
en
because there's
Afrique,
incredible
une passion
talent,
incroyable.
passion in
On
Africa,
joue partout, on joue
and
dans
people
des
play
rues,
all
on
over the
joue
place in
partout,
the
on joue
street.
partout au
People just play
football.
football
Il faut
anywhere,
aider,
and we need to
évidemment,
help,
et
absolutely.
il faut s'améliorer.
And we need to improve the
Il faut un peu plus de
situation.
temps.
We also need more
Si vous
time.
regardez le
We
rapport
need
qu'on a
more
fait
time.
sur
If
le
you look at
forward
the Forward
numéro 1,
1.0 report, sorry, no, we're now on Forward 2.0, you can see that the most projects were carried out by Europeans. And the Europeans, you might say, have it all already. And some of the others haven't spent their money yet. So it just shows that we just need a little bit longer. We need more time. We've created regional offices now in Addis Ababa, in Dakar,
et à Johannesburg.
Johannesburg,
Justement avec du personnel de la FIFA qui peut soutenir.
In Cairo, so that people can be supported and get the support from FIFA through these offices. So we need a little bit more organisation, a little bit more structure, and I think this is going to help and we will have excellent results. When it comes to VAR, well, yes, I saw what happened, I saw the problems. It's a real shame that occurred, but that doesn't justify, I think, the problems didn't justify what happened afterwards, I would say. But then it's not FIFA's real role there to intervene. It was CAF that was organising the Champions League, so it wasn't our role to intervene. But of course we're there to provide help and support to ensure that things like this don't happen again in future, because it does affect credibility of African football.
Before from the left-hand side, exactly. Martin.
Johnny, hi, it's Martin Ziegler from The Times. Just wanted to ask, there's been, in the build-up to the Women's World Cup, some stuff's come out of Australia, talking with the Players Association there, saying that there should be equal prize money for women as for men. I know there's been a big increase in the prize money for the Women's World Cup, but how do you actually deal with this issue about equality?
It's a good question, and a question that, whatever I answer, I'm wrong, right? That's why it's a tricky one as well. But the truth of the matter is that, yes, we have increased the payments, the prize money, and the payments for the associations participating in the Women's World Cup from 15 million to 50 million, so almost 3 times more. Now this is still much less than the Men's World Cup. This has to do, unfortunately as well, with the way the rights were commercialized in FIFA. Well, it was the same in UEFA, so before. Sadly. But that was probably, or certainly the reality as well, which was, well, we sell you the rights for the World Cup, the Men's World Cup, and on top we give you also the Women's World Cup and the youth and the boys and the girls and the beach soccer, and you can have everything else. Which means we didn't really explore and exploit the potential for commercial revenues for the Women's World Cup. And this is what we should be doing from now. Because if the Men's World Cup makes 3.5 to 4 billion viewers and the Women's World Cup makes 1 billion viewers, then the value of the rights, you are much more expert than me, if the Men's World Cup is 6 billion, the Women's World Cup should be at least 1.5 billion. Right? But it's not. It's much, 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 much less than that. And somehow, of course, the distribution and the prize money has to be linked as well with the revenues. So what we have to do now is to develop women's football, is to invest in women's football, in competitions. I had proposed in the Congress in Bahrain a Women's World League 2 years ago. It was then, let's say, put on hold. We will resuscitate it. I don't know, you say that, and we'll bring it up on the table. Because we need to create more boost around women's football, and we need to commercialize it separately from men's football. And all the revenues generated then will be reinvested, but not only in the top. I mean, if I have to choose, we are investing 500 million in the next 4 years in women's football. If I have to choose between giving to the 24 participating teams in the World Cup, say 300 million to be close to the Men's World Cup, or giving them 50 million and giving 150, because that's what we are doing, 150 million in the forward program for development of youth women's competition, then I will choose the second one. I will invest as well in the development, because we need as well the grassroots to grow. But I want to ask you one question actually to all of you, which for me shows the potential of women's football. If I would have asked you before the Men's World Cup last year, who will be the world champion? I'm sure 90%, 100% probably of this room would have said the usual ones, right? Few of the Europeans, maybe Brazil, maybe Argentina. No? And Europeans, and that's it. If I ask you who will be world champion in 1 month here in France of the Women's World Cup, the answer can actually be, yes, the usual Europeans, Germany, France, England, Italy, maybe, Spain, Sweden. But it could also be actually Brazil, or the US, or Canada, or Japan, or China, or Australia, or New Zealand. Maybe only the Africans are not yet there, but it's at the top level much more widespread than men's football, because it started, the movement started in terms of men's football 100 years earlier in Europe and in South America, and 100 years later for women's football all around the world. So there is a big potential. Sorry for being long.
And here in the second row behind. Yes.
Buenos días, Infantino. Primero, felicitaciones por haber sido reelecto.
Congratulations for having been re-elected. I'm Sergio Lervinsky,
Mendoza y Radio FM Contacto de las Parejas Santa Fe,
Argentina.
Tengo dos preguntas.
I have two questions.
Bueno, referidas al continente probablemente, pero también globales.
To the continent, but also more global, I think, too. Firstly, you talked before about the changes in FIFA relating to the fight against corruption. In CONMEBOL, as you know, we had FIFA Gate, and many leaders were under a lot of pressure and investigation. But we've seen all sorts of issues on this front, therefore, in CONMEBOL. Peru, for example, has been affected. Uruguay also had a number of very serious problems on this front. And I wonder how this is seen from FIFA on the one hand, and also from the media. We wonder how things might change. Thinking about broadcasting rights for big tournaments, these tend to go to large consortia. And these large consortia will then resell or sell on these rights. And instead of doing this democratically, they will hang on to them and then they sell them on to their friends, let's say. So something FIFA could do would be to directly sell, not necessarily through these consortia, who have actually been involved in many of the FIFA Gate problems themselves. This isn't something new. There's plenty of history of this. So that's the first and fairly long question. Secondly, the Club World Cup for 2021, from a sporting perspective, we have seen that probably because of the format that's likely to exist, European clubs will benefit much more than South American clubs. Because of the economic context, South American clubs, let's say like Independiente, for example, that won the South American Cup in December, November 2017, now has 3 players from that team that won, because they've had to sell, or they've sold players on, and they've managed to reinforce the team in other ways. But you know that every 6 months or so, clubs have to buy in, because South America has lots of clubs that sell a lot of sellers, so sell a lot of players, sorry. So this could have an impact if we think about Independiente, we think about River. If they arrive at this Club World Cup at this stage, they will be very much weakened in comparison to these stronger European clubs. So perhaps what might happen is that South American clubs will have very few possibilities of winning the tournament, given the situation. Thank you very much. I think we need to change mindsets, mentalities in Latin America from this point of view. South American clubs need to get stronger, they need to invest, they need to hang on to their players. Of course, we need to give these clubs the possibility of doing that. So if you have a club like Independiente winning a competition in November, then it qualifies for the Club World Cup in June. Perhaps with the income from that Club World Cup, Independiente might be able to hang on to some of these best players for an additional year, because they will have the resources to be able to do this. Because if we continue as we are, without really developing football across the other continents, and I include South America, by the way, in that, we won't achieve anything. We don't organise the Club World Cup just for the sake of it, just for having a tournament. We organise it because we want it to provide a boost to the development of clubs across the world. And before we talked about Brazil, and you see that the revenue there is actually similar to the revenue in Europe. Why then are players leaving and going to Europe? If they go to Real Madrid, well, fair enough. But not all of them play in Real Madrid. So why don't they stay there for? At Flamengo, at Boca, at River, why don't they stay? I don't want anyone to get upset by me mentioning only a certain number of teams. Santos. Anyway, why don't they stay at any of these teams? Because this mentality, this mindset that you train a player and then you sell the player on. No, you need to train and then the player needs to play. And the player needs to play there another year. They need to win a Club World Cup, for example. And a player that today, a Brazilian player that might go off and play in a Portuguese team, shall we say, if he stays longer, for 6 months longer, wins the Club World Cup, or in fact plays very well in the Club World Cup, instead of moving then to a small team in the second division in Portugal, he might actually end up at Real Madrid. So we need to change the philosophy, we need to change the mentality, there needs to be a lot of passion around this. So not everything that we have in place is great, but we can change it. Why not? We should try to change things. What was the other question? The intermediaries, in terms of rights. I absolutely agree. Not 100%, 1,000%. We need to control the flows of money. Where does money come from? Where is it going? If the rights are sold to intermediaries, well, we know what can happen. It wasn't only intermediaries, it was friends, like we've said, members of the executive committee, rights sold between them. Ridiculous, terrible situation. And fortunately, a number of authorities have intervened, and that has come to an end. I absolutely agree with that point you made.
Thank you. Graham Dunbar from the Associated Press. Hi, Graham. What do you think is going to be the most significant decision you take in the next 4 years? And could it involve, how we watch football, when we watch football? You've got to get deep into international match calendar at some point in this term. Coordinating continental championships, affecting league sizes, maybe. In 4 years' time, if we were back here, how would the football we watch, when we watch it, the rhythm of the season, how could it change?
That's a good question. I will answer. Can I answer in 4 years? I have to answer now. Yes, the international match calendar is a topic that we will have to look into very, very seriously. And I know the topic for having discussed it and debated it in the last 20 years. I was defending one part against 5 others at that time. I was defending the European interests, and the calendar, international match calendar today is very Eurocentric. It is very Eurocentric. It's done according to the interests of European football, which, okay, is fine because it's the most powerful football. But we need not to diminish the power of European football, but to grow the power of football outside of Europe. So I would wish that we can have in the international match calendar more of a global vision as well. And, to think about not only Europe in terms of when it's winter, when it's summer, when you can play, when you cannot play, not to think about only the national leagues or the continental competitions, but also worldwide. Hence, a Club World Cup, for example, just to start a thinking process. And I would hope and I would wish that in 4 years from now, some of the investors from America, from Arab countries, from China or other Asian countries who are today investing in European clubs, that they are also investing in clubs from their own country, and that we maybe have some more games between clubs in different parts of the world. This is finally as well part of the global development of football. Similarly, or a similar discussion needs to be made for national teams. You know, I was trying to get the 48 teams for 2022 already. Okay, it didn't happen, right? We tried. But why? Because take Asian football, which is expanding. In Asia, you have 46 countries who play to qualify. We can take Africa, it's more or less the same, 55, 54. Who play in, let's take the Asian example, they play to qualify 4 teams for the World Cup. And a half, let's say 4. Now, if you are an Asian country and you start the qualifiers, you know already that you have Japan, they will qualify. Korea, they will qualify. Iran, they will qualify. Then you have what? Australia, probably as well. What do you do? What do you do? You don't even start playing because you say, okay, anyway, I have no chance. 3 out of 4 we know already before because they are so much better, because they are so much more developed. So I don't even bother to invest in football. If we tell the Asians, instead of 4 teams, you have 8 teams, national teams who qualify, it doesn't open just to 4 more. It opens to 20 more, because suddenly you have Thailand, you have the UAE, you have Vietnam, you have Uzbekistan, who have made good results at continental level, but who have no chance or had no chance to go up. We have to give them a chance, and they will develop, and then I think we have more of that as well. So I think I always liked, competitions. We did the Nations League when I was in UEFA, for example. There was a national team. In CONCACAF, they did a Nations League as well. It's nice to do something for national teams as well, certainly regionally or at the worldwide level.
Okay, we are an hour into this press conference. We're coming to a close, but we have time for a couple of questions before we do. So on the left-hand side, please.
Gabriele Marcotti, ESPN. Before in your speech and now you spoke about the forward program and development. Right now, the way things are set up is it's one federation, one vote, one access. From a development perspective, if you're talking globally, it creates an issue because obviously if you devote funds to if San Marino and India get the same amount of funds, it's obviously going to have much more of an impact in San Marino. And I mentioned San Marino, but I could mention many Caribbean nations, many of the very small nations that are out there, some very wealthy small nations too. Is this something, maybe it's not at the top of your agenda, is this something that might be addressed in the near future? How do you feel about that?
I feel very strongly about that, actually. And that's why I'm encouraging always the associations that don't need the money to make sure that it is invested somewhere else, of course, through FIFA. And this is happening in some countries. I mean, France, for instance, Germany and so on. They are investing some of the money in other countries with some programs that they have put in place. Obviously, that's not enough. And obviously, we have to look into that. We are partly looking into that. This goes a little bit under in the global discussion on the FORA program, because we have two elements of the FORA program which are already foreseeing higher payments to countries who need it most for travel costs and for equipment. So there is no European association, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe one or two, who gets these funds, which are a few hundred thousand. It's not changing your life, but still a few hundred thousand, which you get if you need it to travel. I mean, if you are an island somewhere in the ocean and you want to play a game against somebody else, you either swim or you fly. Huh? If you swim, it's a bit dangerous because of all the sharks, even if there are more sharks in some offices than in the ocean, but it doesn't matter. If you swim, it's dangerous, so you have to fly, and flying costs money, so we need to support that. So we have to look how we can support more those who are in need. That's why we have to look as well at other projects involving the rest of the world in organization, in competitions. We give for the first time 1 million a year to the zonal groups. It's groups of associations, for example, they exist in Africa, they exist in Asia and in Caribbean, for the organization of tournaments, youth tournaments, so they can invite in one island, whatever, teams to play. These are small drops. It's not enough, but it's certainly something we have to absolutely look into.
Okay, so we come to the last question. It was requested a long time ago. I'm sorry for the other colleagues, but we have limited time. I'm sure that we'll have other opportunities in the future. I do apologize for that.
I'm here for 4 years.
Complimenti, ovviamente Rai Sport abbiamo bisogno solo di 2 parole in italiano.
Lei ha parlato, ha sottolineato President, that have been carried out.
I will accept this question in Italian for obvious reasons, but I would also ask
Italian
so that everyone can understand as well. Thank you.
Italian is not an official language of...
No, it's not official, it's not the interpretation.
Cambiamo tutto, mettiamo l'italiano.
Complimenti, complimenti.
Grazie. Allora, to start.
Go ahead, please.
Buongiorno Presidente.
Buongiorno.
Complimenti ovviamente, Rai Sport abbiamo bisogno solo di 2 parole in italiano. Lei ha parlato, ha sottolineato spesso che il calcio deve essere di tutti, non per pochi, e quindi questo progetto della Super Champions va in direzione contraria, ci sembra.
For my colleagues in the interpretation booths, I will accept this question in Italian for obvious reasons, but I would also ask our President to be so kind to then put the answer in English so that everyone...
No, they want it in Italian?
Yeah.
Yes, but after the
Italian, I make
so
it
that everyone can understand as well. Thank you.
Italian is not an official language of...
No, it's not official, it's not the interpretation.
Show me.
Italian is not an official language of this.
I need and Arabic also.
Presidente, non va bene.
Non va bene, cambiamo tutto. Cambiamo tutto, mettiamo l'italiano.
Complimenti, complimenti.
Grazie. Allora, 2 parole su la Super Champions.
Che va in senso contrario rispetto a un calcio che deve essere di tutti e non di pochi.
Ma il calcio deve essere di tutti, e non solo di tutti in Europa, ma di tutti nel mondo. Questa è la nostra filosofia. Crediamo nella mondializzazione del calcio, se si può utilizzare questo termine. Una società che è sempre più divisa. Uno dei pochi elementi che ci unisce è il calcio. Dunque, finché ci sarò io alla presidenza della FIFA, cercherò di sviluppare sempre più il calcio a livello mondiale, aprendo, creando competizioni, creando possibilità di sviluppo in tutto il mondo. Va bene? In English? Yeah, about this. Well, our philosophy, my philosophy as FIFA president is one of openness. And as long as I am president of FIFA, I will push as hard as I can to have more global, worldwide competitions, possibilities, openness for everyone to be able to play. Then, of course, you have the best and those who are less good, the richer and the poorer ones, obviously. But the more we are open, the more we do, the better it is. This is my philosophy, and this is something that I'm keen on continuing to work on. Tá bom?
Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Muito obrigado. Shukran. Grazie mille.